The humidity clung to everything at 2:13 in the morning. The underground poker room beneath the Chicago warehouse breathed with the weight of August, thick and suffocating, a room where fortunes changed hands and men learned the cost of weakness. Cigar smoke hung in layers, rolling against the black ceiling like fog rolling off a dark lake, so dense you could taste the Cuban tobacco on your tongue before you even stepped through the steel door. Luca Corsetti sat at the green felt table, his chair positioned so he could see every entrance, every shadow, every trembling hand. 41 years old with silver threading through dark hair at the temples. A scar ran from the corner of his left eye to his cheekbone, a thin white line that had become part of his face so long ago he no longer remembered which enemy had given it to him. His suit cost $17,000. His watch cost more than most people's cars. 4 armed guards stood frozen at the cardinal points of the room, one at the main door, one at the service entrance, one by the vault, one by the bar. They did not move. They barely breathed. In Luca's presence, men learned the difference between being alive and being permitted to exist. Cash lay stacked at his elbows. Not for betting. For intimidation. The money meant nothing to him anymore. What mattered was the message, I can lose more than you can earn in 10 lifetimes. Then the side entrance crashed open. The sound cut through the poker room like a blade through silk, sudden and violent and wrong. Every man's hand moved toward either a weapon or the table. Every eye fixed on the doorway. The guards did not move, but their bodies coiled tighter, muscles tensing, fingers flexing. A woman stumbled through the opening. She was 29 years old but looked like she had aged a decade in a single night. Dark hair, almost black, plastered to her pale face with sweat and blood. One eye swollen completely shut, the skin around it purple and black like rotted fruit, so bloated the eyelid would not open. Handprint bruises wrapped around her throat like a noose, each finger outlined in dark purple so vivid it looked painted on, a map of violence written in her own skin. Her white tank top hung torn at the shoulder, revealing a thin, fragile collarbone, and blood soaked through the fabric at her split lip, dripping steady drops onto the concrete floor. She collapsed. One moment she stood in the doorway and the next moment her legs simply surrendered, and she fell onto the concrete floor like a puppet with its strings cut. Her breath came in wheezing gasps, each inhale a struggle, as if her windpipe had been crushed and was only slowly, painfully, learning to open again. The poker game stopped. 8 men in suits that cost more than most people earned in a year went absolutely still. Cards froze in midair. One man's hand halted halfway to his drink. The silence that followed was not peaceful. It was the silence of predators detecting unexpected prey, of systems calibrating to a new threat. Luca's hand froze halfway to his chips. His guards exchanged glances. In 15 years, they had never seen him move toward anyone without calculation, without a precise understanding of what he would gain. But now, watching this woman gasping on the concrete floor, Luca stood. His chair scraped backward with a sound like metal on teeth. He moved toward her. Her one good eye fixed on him, and in that moment she was not looking at the most powerful crime boss in Chicago. She was looking at the only person in the room who might help her. She was looking at a stranger, and she was placing her life in his hands because she had no other choice, no other option, no other prayer left. Please, she whispered, and the word came out shattered like glass. He's going to kill me. And my daughter, Lily, she's only 7, she's alone at the shelter across town. Her voice cracked on every word, breaking apart like something that had already been damaged so many times that each new sound risked destroying it completely. The police won't listen. He has friends in the department. His friends with Detective Morris. Detective Morris owes him favors. The woman gasped between words, her breath ragged. I am nobody. I sleep in my car. But my daughter, Lily, is not nobody. She is 7 years old and she is afraid of the dark, and I left her at a shelter because he was waiting outside our car, and I had to run, and I don't know what he's going to do. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Real thunder, not metaphorical. Outside the warehouse, 3 blocks away, a storm was building over Lake Michigan, and the sound carried down through the steel and concrete like a warning. Luca knelt beside her. He did not touch her yet. He simply knelt, so his eyes were level with hers, so she did not have to look up into his face from the floor like some kind of broken creature. "What is your name?" His voice was deep and solid like an oath. Like something carved in stone before time began. "Rowan," she whispered. "Rowan Hartley." "Rowan." He said her name like he was learning the rules of a new language. "My name is Luca. You are safe now." The man who did this, his name. Tyler. Tyler Brennan. My ex. He found me in the parking garage where I sleep. He said he was done with me making his life difficult. He said he was going to make sure I could never testify against him about anything ever again. He said, her voice broke completely. He said he was going to erase me. Luca stood. He did not look at Rowan anymore. He looked at Tony, the lieutenant who had been with him since the beginning, who had buried bodies and moved money and kept secrets that could destroy empires. Luca's eyes moved to Theo, the second lieutenant, who controlled the docks and half the police department through bribes and blackmail. "Get her to medical. Now. 100% discretion. If one word of this leaves that facility, I will know it was you, and I will erase you from existence so thoroughly that your own mother will forget your name." His voice was flat. Not angry. Anger requires emotion. This was worse. This was the voice of a man stating facts about the universe. "Then I want everything on Tyler Brennan. Where he lives. Who he knows. Which precinct he works for. How many times he has beaten a woman. Every address. Every connection. Every debt." Tony and Theo moved. They did not run. Running would suggest panic. They simply ceased standing still and began moving with purpose, and within 30 seconds Rowan was being lifted carefully, almost gently, by two enormous men in black suits, and carried toward a side exit where a black SUV waited with its engine running. But what changed everything was something Luca did not say to anyone. What changed everything was that Luca Corsetti, 41 years old, the most powerful man in Chicago, the man who had built an empire from violence and controlled it through absolute will, what changed everything was that he knelt beside a broken woman on a concrete floor, and for the first time in 23 years, since the day he held his stillborn daughter in his arms and felt her perfect, lifeless weight, he felt something move in his chest that he had believed was dead. A child. She had mentioned a child, and that child was alone, and that child was afraid of the dark. Luca stood in the poker room, surrounded by cigar smoke and stacks of cash and 8 men who had never seen his face show emotion, and something cold and dangerous stirred in his chest, something that looked like it might be rage but felt like it might be love, and he did not yet understand the difference. The rain started outside the warehouse. You could hear it begin, first as scattered drops tapping against the roof like fingers drumming an impatient rhythm, then building into sheets of water that made a sound like static, like the world itself was being erased and rewritten. Luca looked at his poker chips. He looked at the cash. He looked at the game that had been frozen mid-hand for the last 3 minutes. He stood, straightened his jacket, $17,000, not a wrinkle, and walked toward the stairs that led up and out of the underground room. "Game is finished," he said, and his voice carried the weight of a closing door. "Everyone out." The men scrambled to obey. Chips scattered. Cards fluttered. Within 2 minutes the room was empty except for a guard at the door. "Now, let us go back 5 days. Let us go back to a moment before violence, before a woman collapsed into Luca's poker room, before a child named Lily was left alone in the dark. Let us go back to the public park on the south side of Chicago where a homeless woman named Rowan Hartley was about to make a choice that would change everything, a choice that would, in 5 days' time, bring the most powerful crime boss in the city to his knees, and force him to decide whether power meant anything at all if there was no one left to protect. The park was crowded with summer. Cicadas buzzed in the heat. Children played on grass that had not been watered in weeks, so the ground was hard and yellow and cracked like skin in drought. Parents sat on benches, watching their children with the casual vigilance of people who still believed the world was safe. Rowan Hartley sat on a bench too, but she was not a parent. She was a woman with $78 to her name, which meant she had 5 days, until she could not pay for gas, until she could not buy her daughter a meal, until she had to make choices about whether Lily ate or whether she kept the car running so they would have shelter at night. She held a handwritten list of debts in her lap. The list kept growing. The cicadas buzzed in that brutal August heat, their sound like 1,000 tiny saws cutting through the humid air. Rowan Hartley sat on a bench at Riverside Park with her 7-year-old daughter Lily, and in her pocket she carried exactly $78. That was all. $78 between survival and catastrophe, and 5 days until even that ran out. The sandwich they shared came from the corner bodega on Roosevelt, turkey and mustard on wheat bread, split down the middle so each of them got half. Lily bit into her portion and made a small, satisfied sound, the way children do when hunger has been their constant companion for long enough that any food tastes like abundance. Rowan watched her daughter eat and counted the money in her head, a mathematics of desperation she performed dozens of times each day. $78. Rent on the storage unit for their backpack cost $30 a month. Gas for the Honda would take $20. That left $28 for food for 2 people for 5 days. $7 per day. Maybe less if she could find the food bank that opened on Thursdays. The list sat folded in her backpack, a handwritten inventory of ruin. Medical bills from Lily's appendectomy, $47,000. Collection agency notices threatening wage garnishment from a job she'd lost 3 weeks ago at the grocery store checkout. Eviction documents from the apartment they'd vacated last month. Rowan had kept every piece of paper, as if documenting her own destruction might somehow make it make sense. She'd lost the job because Tyler had shown up at the store. That was the pattern now. He would find her, corner her, his hands would become fists or worse, and then she would lose whatever fragile foothold she'd managed to gain. 3 months ago she'd had a 1-bedroom apartment and a steady paycheck. Then the bruises started showing on her arms and neck, and her manager, a woman named Sandra who'd always been kind, had quietly told her that customers were asking why she looked scared all the time. "I can't have that energy in my store," Sandra had said, not unkindly. "I'm sorry." So Rowan and Lily had moved into the 2004 Honda Civic parked behind the Walgreens on Roosevelt, where the security cameras didn't quite reach the back corner. They washed up in gas station bathrooms at dawn before the staff could tell them to leave. They slept with the doors locked and the windows cracked just enough for air, and Rowan lay awake most nights with one hand resting on the door handle, ready to drive if she needed to. Lily finished her half of the sandwich and licked the mustard from her fingers. She was small for 7, thin in a way that made Rowan's chest tighten with something between love and fury. The child had survived appendicitis, survived her father's fists before he'd found Rowan that one final time, survived a life that no 7-year-old should have to survive. And yet there was still light in Lily's eyes when she looked at things. She had watched a pigeon win a battle with another pigeon for breadcrumbs and had actually smiled. That was the kind of strength Rowan was fighting for, not to be strong herself, but to preserve the capacity in her daughter to find wonder in a Tuesday afternoon at a public park with a half sandwich and the sky breaking open above them in that particular blue-white shade that meant a storm was building somewhere. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But the sky was keeping score. "Mama, look," Lily said, pointing. A boy about 6 years old was chasing a soccer ball across the yellowed grass, his movements clumsy and joyful, the way children ran when they'd never learned to be afraid. He wore shorts that probably cost more than Rowan's entire wardrobe. His sneakers were pristine white leather with a swoosh that gleamed in the sun. Everything about him signaled wealth, the casual belonging of someone who had never once worried about $78 lasting 5 days. The boy's shoe caught in a divot in the ground. His arms pinwheeled. He fell forward, his trajectory changing subtly, carrying him not toward the grass but toward the community pool where a group of teenagers were doing cannonballs off the diving board. He hit the water head first. For a moment, nothing registered. The teenagers kept laughing. The parents on the benches didn't look up. The moment stretched like taffy, those suspended seconds before impact becomes catastrophe, and Rowan saw it clearly, the way his body went rigid, the way his head hit the tile lip of the pool before he went under, the way the water closed over him like a mouth swallowing. She was moving before her brain caught up with her body. The backpack fell. Her sandwich dropped to the bench. Lily called out, "Mama," but Rowan was already running, her worn sneakers pounding the hard ground, her breath coming in sharp gasps as she reached the pool's edge and dove, fully clothed, into water so chlorinated it burned her eyes. The boy was sinking. She could see him, suspended in the blue-green murk, not struggling, just descending with the passive acceptance of a child who didn't yet understand that drowning could happen to him. Rowan kicked hard and wrapped her arms around his small chest and pushed upward, her legs burning, her lungs screaming, the weight of his body and her own waterlogged clothes pulling down, always pulling down. They broke the surface. His mouth opened and he vomited chlorinated water and gasped air that sounded like 1,000 ragged sobs. Rowan performed back blows the way the emergency room doctor had taught her 6 months ago, before Lily's appendix ruptured, before everything fell apart. The boy coughed and coughed again, his small body convulsing in her arms. "You're safe now," she whispered. "You're okay. You're okay." 2 men in dark suits came running from the direction of the parking lot, their movement synchronized, their expression shifting from casual to frantic in the span of heartbeats. They were built like the kind of men who made problems disappear, and their eyes were fixed on the boy with an intensity that told Rowan everything she needed to know about who he belonged to. "Marco," one of them shouted, his accent thick with the consonants of another country. "Marco, speak to us!" The boy clung to Rowan, his small arms wrapped around her neck, and she held him because he was a child who had almost died and deserved to be held. The 2 men spoke rapid Italian into phones clipped to their collars, their words coming too fast for Rowan to follow, though she caught the word "signore" repeated 3 times. "Thank you," one of them said finally, reaching for the boy. His English was heavily accented, the words careful. "Thank you. We have reward." "No," Rowan said. She was shaking now, her clothes dripping, her teeth beginning to chatter. "No reward. Just keep him safe. That's all I need. Just make sure he's safe." The man looked at her for a long moment, really looked at her, taking in the worn fabric of her clothes, the way her hair hung wet against her face, the look in her eyes that said she'd learned the hard way that safety was something you had to fight for. Something flickered behind his expression, a recognition of some kind, and then he nodded. "His name is Marco Corsetti," the man said. "You remember that? You ever need anything at all, you tell someone that you saved Marco Corsetti from the water. You say that name." They took the boy from her arms. A black SUV with tinted windows rolled up to the pool's edge, its doors opening like the mouth of something vast and expensive. The boy looked back at Rowan once, his eyes still wide, his mouth still trembling, and then they were gone. The SUV accelerated smoothly toward the parking lot and disappeared beyond the tree line, leaving behind only the faint smell of new leather and expensive cologne. Rowan stood in the pool for another moment, her dress clinging to her ribs, her breath still shaky. Around her, the park had returned to its normal rhythms. The teenagers went back to their cannonballs. The parents returned to their phones. The pigeons gathered for breadcrumbs. By the time she climbed out of the pool and returned to the bench, the sun had shifted an inch across the sky. Lily had eaten Rowan's half of the sandwich. She looked up with an expression somewhere between worry and guilt. "I'm sorry, Mama. You were gone and I was hungry." Rowan dropped onto the bench beside her daughter and pulled her close, not caring that she was dripping water onto Lily's dry clothes, that she smelled like chlorine and decay, that the backpack with everything they owned in the world was still sitting at the edge of the pool. "It's okay, baby," she said. "It's okay. I'm sorry I left you." They sat like that as the light began to change, the August heat still pressing down, the cicadas still singing their terrible buzzing song. Rowan's mind had already moved past the boy, past the pool, back to the mathematics of survival. She needed gas. She needed to return to the shelter before 9 p.m. or they wouldn't let her check back in for the night. She needed to figure out which of her job leads might actually answer her calls. The boy named Marco Corsetti had already vanished from her consciousness like a dream upon waking. She didn't know that he was the nephew of the man who sat beneath the earth in that poker room filled with cigar smoke. She didn't know that 3 men, his uncle and 2 lieutenants named Tony and Theo, were at that very moment having a conversation about the woman who had appeared from nowhere and pulled a drowning child from the water without asking who he was, without demanding anything except a promise that the boy would be safe. She didn't know that 5 days later, she would collapse into that underground room bleeding from her throat, gasping about a daughter left alone, and that her savior would turn out to be the man who owed her everything and had never even known her name. For now, she picked up the empty sandwich wrapper and folded it carefully. She took Lily's hand and stood, her wet dress clinging to her skin like a second heartbeat, and they began the long walk back to the parking lot where the Honda Civic was waiting, and where the night was about to become something much, much darker. The hospital room was silent except for the breathing machine's mechanical whisper. Rowan sat in the plastic chair beside Lily's bed, her daughter's small hand wrapped around her finger, and counted the machines keeping her alive. 1, 2, 3. The appendectomy had been emergency, the kind that doesn't ask permission, doesn't wait for insurance approval or payment plans. The kind that saves your child's life and destroys yours in the same moment. The bill arrived 3 weeks later. $47,000. Rowan read the number so many times it stopped being words and became a physical weight pressing on her chest. She pulled out the list, the one she kept in her jacket pocket, wrinkled and tear-stained. Medical debt, $47,000. Car payment overdue, $890. Storage unit final notice, $340. Rent arrears, $3,200. The pencil marks were in her own handwriting, each number a small surrender. That was 2 months ago. Now Rowan sat at the kitchen table of the shelter, a communal space that smelled like industrial cleaner and broken hope, and counted the cash in front of her. $78. That was everything. $78 to last until her next shift at the diner, which might not happen because she'd missed for days when Lily spiked a fever and the shelter wouldn't let sick children stay without a doctor's clearance she couldn't afford. Lily was in the other room with the other children, drawing on donated paper. Rowan could hear her voice, bright, unbroken, still believing the world made sense. That sound, that pure unburdened voice, was why the debt didn't matter. The foreclosure didn't matter. The night sleeping in the Honda Civic with her daughter curled in the back seat, the 2 of them sharing one blanket, didn't matter. Lily was alive. That was the mathematics that mattered. A knock at the shelter door interrupted her thoughts. One of the volunteers poked her head in. "Rowan? There's a man here asking for you. Says it's about the park incident." Rowan's stomach tightened. The police? Had they finally decided to press charges against Tyler for something? She'd filed a report after the last attack, showed them the bruises on her neck shaped like fingerprints, and watched the officer's face go carefully neutral when she mentioned Tyler's connection to the department. She followed the volunteer to the front desk. A man in his early 30s stood waiting, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her car. Dark eyes. A scar running from his left temple to his jawline. When he saw her, something shifted in his expression, recognition, but also something deeper. Concern. "Miss Hartley." His voice was calm. Measured. "My name is Tony Russo. I work for Luca Corsetti. You pulled Marco Corsetti from Riverside Park 5 days ago. Pulled him from the pool. Saved his life." Rowan's mind flashed back to that August afternoon. The boy thrashing in the deep end. The lifeguard nowhere in sight. The split-second decision to jump in fully clothed, to grab the small body and pull upward, until his face broke the surface and he was coughing, gasping, alive. He was drowning, Rowan said simply. "I did what anyone would do." "No." Tony shook his head. "Most people would have called for help and waited. You dove in. You didn't know who he was. You didn't ask for payment or contact information. You held him while he was terrified, and then you left. You never even told him your name. He's okay? Rowan's voice rose with sudden fear. He wasn't hurt? His parents? He's fine. Better than fine, thanks to you. Marco is 9 years old. He's Luca's nephew. Marco's mother, Luca's sister, is devastated with gratitude. So is Luca. Tony pulled a card from his jacket pocket. It was black, embossed with gold lettering. A phone number. Nothing else. Luca would like to thank you properly. He's asking you to call. Please. Rowan stared at the card. Black cards meant money. Meant power. Meant someone with enough resources to make things happen. She thought of the $47,000. Thought of Lily sleeping in a room with 12 other children, none of them able to afford better. Thought of the medical debt that had become her singular identity, not Rowan the mother, not Rowan the survivor, but Rowan the debtor. I don't need anything, she said, though her hands were trembling. I just needed to help. That's all. I understand. Call anyway. Give him 5 minutes. That's all he's asking. Tony placed the card in her palm. His hand was warm. Solid. The kind of hand that had probably held a gun, had probably done things Rowan couldn't imagine. 5 minutes. For Marco. For my employer. For someone who never asks for thanks but is offering it anyway. He left before she could refuse again. Rowan stood in the shelter's entryway for a long time, the black card heavy in her hand like a choice she didn't remember making. Around her, the shelter's evening routine unfolded, children being put to bed, mothers checking their phones for messages from men who'd left, volunteers moving through the hallways with the exhausted grace of people who'd given up changing the system and settled for easing the pain. She walked back to the kitchen. Call the number. Luca Corsetti answered on the first ring. Ms. Hartley. Thank you for calling. His voice was different than she expected, not rough or threatening, but measured. Controlled. Like a man used to power so absolute he didn't need to perform it. Your nephew is alive because of your courage. Because you saw a child in danger and you responded. No questions. No hesitation. Each sentence landed precisely. I don't forget debts like that. I wanted you to know that Marco is safe. And I wanted to make you an offer. Rowan's throat went dry. She'd heard stories about men like this. Organized crime. Mafia. The kind of offers that came with strings attached, with obligations that could swallow you whole. I don't want anything, she whispered. You're living in a shelter, Luca said, not unkindly. You have a daughter. You're carrying debt that will take you 10 years to repay. And you're telling me you don't want anything. How did he know? How did he know about Lily, about the debt, about the exact mathematics of her desperation? I know because my people know. Because I make it my business to understand people who do extraordinary things for free. You pulled my nephew from a pool without knowing who he was. That tells me everything about who you are. That tells me you're the kind of woman who deserves help. So here's what I'm offering. Tomorrow morning, a car will pick you up at 7 a.m. You and your daughter. Pack 1 bag each. You're coming to stay at my home. You're going to see a doctor about those bruises on your neck and arms. And we're going to talk about what comes next. I can't. You can. And you will. 7 a.m. Don't be late. The line went dead. Rowan stood in the shelter kitchen, the phone still pressed to her ear, and felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She looked at the list in her pocket, the debt that had become her entire world, and understood that 5 days ago when she'd jumped into that pool, she'd set something in motion that was only now coming into focus. At exactly 6:55 the next morning, a black SUV pulled up to the shelter's entrance. Rowan sat in the passenger seat with Lily beside her, one bag of their belongings in the trunk, and watched the Chicago skyline grow larger as they drove toward the part of the city where people didn't count their money in 10s and 20s, where the buildings had names instead of numbers, where a single man's word could change the mathematics of survival itself. What she didn't know was that the moment she'd agreed to come, Margaret Harrington had received a phone call from an old contact. A man named Tyler Brennan who wanted his ex-girlfriend back, and who would do anything to get her out of Luca Corsetti's orbit. What she didn't know was that in that moment, two conspiracies had begun to weave themselves together like rope, and that this rope would be used to try to hang her, to destroy her, to erase her from the life she was about to enter. But first, there was silence. There was morning light. There was the simple fact of forward motion, of a car carrying a mother and daughter toward something neither of them could yet comprehend. The tires hummed against the highway. Lily slept against the window. And Rowan held the black card in her hand and tried to understand what it meant to be seen. The warehouse walls sweat with rain. Rowan stands frozen, Lily pressed against her chest, watching Tyler's hand shake as the gun trembles inches from their daughter's temple. The metal is cold. The silence is suffocating. Thunder cracks overhead like the world splitting open. Then light floods in from everywhere at once. 12 men in black suits materialize from the shadows like they were always there, waiting. Tony moves through the side entrance with 3 others, their footsteps echoing off concrete in perfect synchronization. Theo advances from the north wall, his hand already reaching. And behind them all, stepping through the main door with rain streaming down his face, Luca Corsetti enters like a man walking into his own office. Tyler's pupils dilate. The gun wavers. Back off. Back off or I'll shoot her. I swear to God I'll. You'll what? Luca's voice cuts through the warehouse like a blade wrapped in ice. Not loud. Not angry. Just inevitable. Shoot a 7-year-old girl in front of 12 witnesses? In front of 4 cameras. He gestures to the corners where surveillance equipment blinks red. You're out of moves, Tyler. You've been out of moves for the last 48 hours. Tyler's arm shakes so violently the gun rattles against Lily's ear. She whimpers, and Rowan feels her daughter's entire body trembling against hers. She's my daughter, Tyler says, but his voice has become the voice of a drowning man. Rowan is mine. This is family business. Luca steps closer, unhurried, his expensive shoes clicking against the concrete. Rowan is not yours. She never was. And Lily, he pulls a folder from his suit jacket, holds it up. DNA test from St. Mary's Hospital when Lily was born. You are not her biological father, Tyler. No legal claim. No custody rights. Nothing. You're nobody to that child. The words land like bullets. Tyler's face crumbles. His lower lip starts shaking. The gun begins to lower just slightly, and that's all the opening Theo needs. He moves like water, disarming Tyler in 2 fluid motions, one hand striking the gun away, the other pinning Tyler's arm to his body. The weapon clatters across the floor. Tyler tries to fight, throws wild punches, screams incoherent threats, but there are 3 men on him now, and he's pinned against the cold concrete before he can land a single blow. He breaks. Not gradually, completely. His body goes rigid, then collapses into sobs so violent his whole frame shakes. Please, please, I didn't mean, I just wanted. You wanted to hurt a woman who had the courage to leave you, Luca says, crouching beside Tyler's face so close that their eyes are level. You wanted to terrorize a 7-year-old girl. You wanted power over someone weaker than you because it made you feel strong. Luca's hand moves to Tyler's jaw, tilting his chin up. That ends tonight. Everything you are ends tonight. Outside, the sirens have been approaching for 3 minutes. Nobody inside the warehouse heard them over the rain and the chaos. But now 6 black FBI SUVs surround the building, and agents in tactical gear pour out like a coordinated military operation. Doors slam. Footsteps thunder up the metal stairs. The first agent through the warehouse door is a woman in her 50s with steel-gray eyes and a federal prosecutor's badge. Behind her come 2 more agents, and behind them, Margaret Harrington in handcuffs. She looks destroyed. The white Chanel suit that cost more than Rowan's entire life is wrinkled and stained. Her silver hair is disheveled, falling in strands across her face. Her composure, that carefully constructed armor of wealth and social power, has shattered completely. She sees Luca and her eyes widen with the understanding that this was always the plan. "You set me up," Margaret says, her voice hoarse. "You recorded everything." Luca buttons his jacket calmly. "The bartender at Aria where you met Tyler works for me. Every word of your conspiracy, recorded. Your plans to kidnap Lily. Your media campaign to destroy Rowan. Your strategy to steal my territories while I was distracted. All documented. All evidence." Margaret lunges forward, straining against her handcuffs, screaming with a rage so primal it sounds animal. "You can't do this. I have lawyers. I have connections in this city." The federal prosecutor steps forward, reading from a warrant with the practiced voice of someone who has done this 1,000 times. "Margaret Harrington, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit kidnapping, extortion, racketeering, wire fraud, and attempted murder. Federal charges carry a minimum sentence of 40 years. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Margaret tries to lunge at Rowan, her face contorted with hatred. "This is your fault. You ruined everything. You're nothing. You always were nothing." Agents grab her arms and drag her toward the door. She fights them, screaming, her shoes scraping against the concrete, her voice echoing through the warehouse until the rain swallows it. Tyler is being read his charges by a different agent. Tyler Brennan, assault with intent to kill, kidnapping, stalking, violation of restraining order, and conspiracy to commit kidnapping. Federal charges due to interstate elements. Minimum sentence of 40 years federal prison. Tyler doesn't struggle anymore. He just cries, his face in the dirt, his shoulders heaving with sobs that sound like his entire world is collapsing. Which it is. Outside, camera flashes explode like lightning. News vans line the warehouse parking lot. Every Chicago news channel will run this footage tonight, the viral spread that Margaret herself orchestrated, but turned into her own destruction. Margaret Harrington, wealthy philanthropist and high society fixture, being led away in handcuffs. Tyler Brennan, the violent stalker who nearly killed a woman and kidnapped her daughter, being loaded into a federal vehicle. Inside the warehouse, the rain continues to hammer the roof. Luca approaches Rowan and Lily slowly, his wet hair plastered to his forehead, his suit soaked through, but his eyes are only on the two of them. Rowan is shaking. Lily is silent, her fingers tangled in her mother's shirt. "You came," Rowan whispers. "You found us. Always." Luca kneels in front of Lily, his massive frame folding down to her eye level. "Are you okay, sweetheart? Did he hurt you?" Lily shakes her head, her voice barely audible. "He said bad words. He said he was my daddy but Mama said he's not. He was wrong about a lot of things." Luca reaches into his pocket and pulls out something small and soft, a handkerchief. He gently wipes the tears from Lily's cheeks. "But he was especially wrong about your Mama. Your Mama is the bravest person I know." Rowan's breath catches. She looks at Luca, and her eyes fill with tears that have nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the sight of this powerful man kneeling in the rain, treating her daughter like she matters. "I almost didn't come," Rowan says, her voice breaking. "I almost sent you a text message. A goodbye. I was going to leave Chicago tonight and take Lily somewhere Tyler could never find us. I thought I was bringing danger to you. I thought you'd be safer without me." Luca stands, his hand cupping Rowan's cheek. "I would never be safer without you. I would be empty. You're the first person in 8 years to make me remember what it feels like to protect something that matters." Rowan reaches into her pocket with shaking hands and pulls out a crumpled piece of paper, the goodbye letter she wrote hours ago, the one she almost sent. "I need you to read this. I need you to know what I was going to say without ever saying it." Luca unfolds the letter carefully, reading in the warehouse light that filters through broken windows. His jaw tightens. His eyes glisten. The letter says, "Luca, I don't know how to thank you. You gave me back my life when I had nothing. You made me feel human when I was invisible. You called me family when everyone else saw me as nobody. I think I'm falling in love with you, and that terrifies me, because everyone I've ever loved has been taken away. I can't let that happen to you. So I'm leaving. Please don't look for me. You deserve peace. You deserve a life without the danger that follows me. Thank you for everything. I will never forget you. Rowan. Luca folds the letter slowly. His hands are trembling. You were going to disappear tonight. To protect you. He steps closer, his hand moving to her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. Loving you is the least dangerous thing I've ever done. It's the only thing that makes sense. Then he kisses her. They're in the warehouse with rain hammering the metal roof and Lily giggling between them, finally safe, finally home. And in that moment, 8 years of silence in a nursery he never opened begins to break. 8 years of a heart that learned not to hope begins to beat again. 8 years of being powerful over everything except what mattered finally transforms into something real. Real strength is not found in never falling but in always standing back up. 3 weeks later, September 15th, morning sunlight pours through the windows of Luca Corsetti's mansion like liquid gold. The hallways echo with footsteps that belong there now. Lily runs through the corridor in her new school uniform, backpack bouncing against her shoulders, her laughter genuine in a way it hasn't been in years. Tony and Theo stand in the kitchen doorway, watching the child chase Rowan down the stairs, both lieutenants wearing expressions that look almost like pride. Rowan sits at the marble kitchen table with Luca, coffee steaming between them. The morning news plays on a television mounted above the granite counter. The anchor's voice is clinical, matter-of-fact, delivering sentences that carry the weight of decades. Margaret Harrington and Tyler Brennan both entered guilty pleas yesterday afternoon, the anchor announces. Harrington received 42 years for racketeering, conspiracy, and orchestrating a systematic campaign of intimidation. Brennan received 40 years for kidnapping, assault, and conspiracy to commit murder. Both will serve their sentences in separate federal facilities with no possibility of parole. The screen cuts to prison footage. Margaret in orange, her face aged a decade in 3 weeks, being led through courthouse halls in handcuffs. Her lawyer's hand on her elbow. The reporters shouting questions she doesn't answer. Then Tyler, sobbing, his legs barely supporting his weight, guards on either side of him, his cries echoing through the hallway like an animal in a trap. Rowan watches without blinking. No triumph in her eyes. No satisfaction. Just the quiet stillness of someone watching a chapter close. Luca reaches over and turns off the television. The sudden silence is almost jarring. How do you feel? His voice is soft, genuinely asking. Rowan takes a long breath. Free. For the first time in years, I feel free. She looks at her hands as if they belong to a stranger. Do you know what I was most afraid of? Not Tyler finding me. Not Margaret destroying me. It was that I'd spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. That Lily would grow up in that shadow. She pauses. Now that shadow has a sentence. 40 years. That shadow has a number. Luca nods slowly. Their empire is being dismantled as we speak. The federal charges brought down the entire network. Margaret's connections dried up the moment the arrest happened. No one wants to be associated with a convicted felon. Her charities are under investigation. Her board seats are being vacated. And Tyler? Rowan asks. His parole officer from his first offense was brought in. Turns out he violated the terms 8 times over. The kidnapping charge alone carries a minimum of 20 years. But combined with the assault, the conspiracy charges, the attempted murder, 40 is accurate. Maybe longer if the appeals drag it out. Lily runs into the kitchen, stops short when she sees them talking, senses the weight of the moment. She climbs into Rowan's lap. Why are you sad? The child asks. I'm not sad, baby. I'm remembering. Sometimes remembering feels like sadness even when it's actually relief. Lily accepts this with the simplicity of childhood logic. She turns to Luca. "Mr. Corsetti, can we make pancakes?" The question breaks something in him. His eyes glisten. He nods without speaking, and when he moves to the stove, his hands are steady but something in his chest has shifted. That afternoon, Luca leads Rowan upstairs to a hallway she's learned to avoid. A door at the far end, always locked, always silent. His footsteps slow. His breathing deepens. He pulls a key from his pocket, a key she's never seen him use, and opens the door. Inside is a nursery painted pale yellow. Stuffed animals sit on cream-colored shelves, arranged with precision that speaks of hands that knew exactly where each one belonged. A crib stands in the corner, untouched. A mobile hangs above it, small silver stars that would catch light if anyone had wound it. Baby books are stacked on a changing table. Photographs line the dresser, a woman glowing with pregnancy, a man's hand on her belly, ultrasound images, and one final image, the same woman holding an impossibly small infant, her face radiant with joy that would be short-lived. Rowan steps inside carefully, like entering a tomb or a temple. Both, somehow. "This was Sophia's room," Luca says. His voice is thick, the words heavy like stones. "I haven't opened this door in 8 years. I couldn't. Every time I came close, I felt like I was losing her all over again. Like opening this door meant accepting that she was really gone." Rowan takes his hand. Her skin warm against his. "Tell me about her." And Luca does something he hasn't done in 8 years. He talks about his daughter. He tells her about building the crib himself with his own hands, how he spent 3 days on the woodwork because he wanted it to be perfect. He tells her about the name, Sophia, meaning wisdom, and how his wife had chosen it the moment she saw the positive test. He tells her about the February morning when his phone rang at 4 a.m, the doctor's voice clinical and impossible, words like stillborn and no apparent cause and "I'm so sorry" that meant nothing and everything. He tells her about the funeral with a casket so small it fit in his palms. About burying his wife's grief beneath his own, beneath work, beneath the construction of an empire that was supposed to mean something. About the years of standing in doorways he couldn't cross, of walking past this room like it didn't exist, of pretending that 8 years of silence could turn loss into acceptance. Rowan listens, tears streaming down her face, holding him as his shoulders shake and his breath comes in ragged patterns. When he finishes, she whispers, "She would be so proud of you. For opening this door. For letting yourself feel again. For not letting grief turn you into stone." Luca looks around the yellow room, at the mobile, at the books, at the photographs of a future that never came to pass. "I think it's time to let someone else use this space. If you're willing." Rowan's breath catches. She knows what he's saying before he says it, but she needs to hear the words. "What do you mean?" Lily needs a real bedroom. Not a guest room. Not something temporary. A space that's hers forever. And Sophia, I think she'd want another little girl to have the room that was built with so much love. I think she'd want joy in here again. Rowan sobs, nods, and when Luca pulls her close, they stand together in the yellow light, 2 broken people learning how to let each other heal. Over the next week, they transform Sophia's room into Lily's room. The yellow paint stays, it becomes bright, hopeful rather than tragic. They add a bed shaped like a castle. They fill the shelves with Lily's books instead of Sophia's. They hang artwork the child has created. Luca installs a desk for homework. Rowan adds curtains patterned with stars. On moving day, Lily runs into the room and freezes. She looks at the castle bed, at the desk with her name painted on a wooden sign, at the bookshelf with all her favorite stories. She turns to Luca, to Rowan, and her face transforms into pure radiance. "This is mine? This is really mine. This is yours," Luca says. "Forever." Lily runs to him and hugs him so hard he laughs, a sound Rowan realizes she's never heard from him before. Pure, unguarded joy. That night, Luca tucks Lily into bed in what was once Sophia's room. The child looks up at him with drowsy eyes, her hand still holding his. "Mr. Corsetti, are you going to be my new dad?" The question stops time. Luca's throat tightens. He looks at Rowan standing in the doorway, and something unspoken passes between them. "Would you like that?" he asks. Lily nods without hesitation. "You make my mama smile. And you make really good pancakes. And you don't leave." Luca kisses her forehead, breathes in the sweet smell of her hair. "Then yes. I'd like that too." After Lily drifts to sleep, Luca and Rowan stand in the hallway. The mansion is quiet around them, the weight of the house somehow lighter now. Luca reaches into his jacket and pulls out a small box. Opens it. Inside is a gold ring, simple, elegant, the kind of ring that speaks of permanence rather than display. "I'm not asking you to marry me yet," he says carefully. "But I'm asking you to stay. To build a life here. To let me be part of your family. To let Lily call me what she asked." Rowan takes the ring with trembling fingers and slides it onto her ring finger. It fits perfectly. "3 weeks ago I was homeless," she whispers. "I had $78 to my name. I was nobody." "You were never nobody," Luca says. "You were always exactly who you are now, strong, brave, willing to dive into a pool to save a stranger's child. You were always this person. I just needed to see it. The world just needed to see it." They stand together in the quiet mansion, and for the first time, Rowan Hartley feels like she's exactly where she belongs. 6 months later, February 3rd. The anniversary of Sophia's death. Luca stands in front of a grave in Riverside Cemetery, Rowan beside him, Lily's hand in his. Yellow roses in his other hand. He places them carefully on the marble headstone, and whispers words meant only for someone who can't hear them anymore. "I'm okay now, baby girl. I found my way back." They drive to Riverside Park, where everything changed. The pool where Rowan saved a drowning child without knowing his name. Marco is there with his mother, Luca's sister, playing on the swings. He sees them arriving and runs, his legs pumping, his face bright. "You're the lady who saved me," he shouts to Rowan. Rowan kneels, smiles. "And you're the boy who changed everything." Luca's sister approaches with tears streaming. "I never got to thank you properly. You gave me my son back." Rowan shakes her head gently. "He gave me my life back. If I hadn't been here that day, I never would have met Luca. I never would have found safety. Your son saved me just as much as I saved him." They sit on a bench overlooking the pool. Lily and Marco play by the water's edge, supervised, safe, alive with the kind of joy that only children can create. Luca wraps his arm around Rowan. Rain begins to fall, light and warm, not cold. A blessing rather than a curse. "Do you ever think about where you were 6 months ago?" Luca asks. "Every day," Rowan says. "Sleeping in my car. Washing up in gas station bathrooms. Running. Believing I was invisible." She pauses. "Believing I deserved it. And now?" Rowan looks at Lily laughing with Marco. At Luca beside her. At the life built from nothing, from terror, from the single moment when a drowning child surfaced and a woman made a choice. "Now I know that real strength is not found in never falling. It's found in always standing back up." The rain falls harder, and neither of them moves to leave. This story teaches us that even in the darkest moments, love finds a way. If you believe that, hit like and subscribe. Leave a comment and tell us how this story made you feel. Thank you for staying with us until the very end.